All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. So, I have hosted quite a few of our webinars, and it is always the most interesting to see where our attendees are located. I see a few of you have already begun putting in the chat where you are currently. But while we await a few more attendees to join in, go ahead and put in the chat where you are joining from. To allow everyone a chance to join in, we will officially get started in about 1 to 2 minutes. We have people overseas as well. I see Saudi Arabia here. We've got the West Coast, the East Coast. A couple Miamians, as usual. Alrighty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are located. I see someone asked really quickly, can I record this meeting? This webinar is already recorded for you. It will be reposted on our LinkedIn as well as our webpage at the end and the conclusion of this webinar. All right. Welcome to today's webinar. This is hosted by the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. Thank you for joining. Thanks for those who are joining us for the first time. Welcome in. And those of you who have joined us previously, welcome back. Now, as the webinar progresses, if you have any questions for myself or my fellow speaker, please leave them in the comment section as you have them. And we will ensure to address them and answer those in the second half or at the end of today's webinar's time. By way of introduction, my name is Kiana Dixson. I am a pharmacist and the Associate Director of Educational Programs here at the ACMA, and I work extensively with experts in this area surrounding prior authorizations and reimbursement. Now, this afternoon, we are actually joined by our Associate Director of Patient Access and leader, Dr. Marian Soliman. Now, Marianne, she has been a pharmacist herself for over 20 years, and she has a vast experience, including working in the clinical setting, in disease management, prior authorizations, of course, formulary development and design, as well as web course development. Marianne has contracted and worked with multiple players in the payer side or the insurance plan side of prior authorizations in several PBMs, and also in both the Medicare and private payer sides. Marianne, we are excited to have you here. You've seen firsthand in the process involved in prior authorizations and the complexities of those. Again, I'm excited to have you here alongside me. I'm interested to hear more, I'm sure the audience is as well, about your work, right, and your passions with patient access.
Thanks, Kiana. So you basically said it all. I have a deep passion for being an advocate for patients. And I got into the prior authorization space a little less than 10 years ago, contracting on the Medicare side to begin with. And I saw a lot of inconsistencies and the lack of transparency in the whole process. And I decided from there that I really want to help kind of pave the road for healthcare professionals and patients to get their medications that they can.
Thanks, Marianne. I know we're going to get a lot of expertise from you today. As you can tell, everyone that's joined here so far, we are in for an exciting webinar today with someone who is both passionate and knowledgeable in this area, right? All eyes have been on the weight loss product Craze lately, and we have received a lot of questions on how to navigate the patient access of these products. So in today's webinar, we will discuss these products, and Dr. Soliman will provide you with some great insights on the approval process for those and some resources that patients or providers they can utilize to gain access to them as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So if you haven't heard about the new weight loss craze that is sweeping the nation, it's not just about fad diets or intense workouts anymore. Right? We're seeing a surge in diabetic medications that are being used for weight loss. And one name is popping up everywhere that you may see: and that are semaglutides. But before we dive in, let's talk about the source of this buzz. Right? These products, they seem to be everywhere, like TikTok, Instagram, and this further increases their popularity and increasing demands from both patients to their providers on how to attain these medications. Here I have Time Magazine. Time Magazine is a well respected publication, and they release an annual best inventions list each year. In 2023, Time Magazine even included these products on their 2023 list. Now, some of the most well-known semaglutide products include Rybelsus, Wegovy, and Ozempic that you see here. But this recognition from Time speaks volumes about the potential impact of these drugs. But it's important for us to really fully understand the context of these products and their rise in popularity. Now, these products aren't new, specifically semaglutides. They aren't new. They've been used for years to treat type 2 diabetes. But their remarkable side effect of significant weight loss has ignited interest in their potential for non diabetic populations as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, semaglutides, these products are experiencing a meteoric rise in popularity. Let's take a look here at this graph, which shows the share of patients prescribed semaglutide during healthcare visits over the past 5 years. What we see here is a remarkable 40-fold increase, showing this explosive surge in semaglutide use. To me, right, we're looking at this graph. This data paints a very clear picture. More and more patients are being prescribed with a semaglutide. So we've seen this dramatic increase in these prescriptions, but who's actually getting them? That is our main question here for the second graph. This graph reveals a fascinating shift, right? In 2018, around 90% of semaglutide users had type 2 diabetes, their intended purpose. But by 2023, that number has dropped to just around 60%. This means that a significant 40% of people taking these products, taking semaglutides, don't have diabetes, right? Indicating another clear trend. These medications are increasingly being used for other indications, such as weight loss, which we are discussing today. Now, semaglutide may be the name that's in the headlines, that's in Time magazines, but it's actually part of a larger class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists. So let's take a step back and first understand how these medications work and what else is in the GLP-1 agonist family. Okay. Imagine GLP-1 receptor agonists, these drugs, as tiny keys that unlock special receptors in your gut and also your brain. Okay. These receptors, when they're activated, they do two very important things. First, they slow down the emptying of your stomach, right, making you feel fuller for longer periods of time. They also send signals to your brain, telling it that you've had enough to eat. So, in simple terms, these products, these drugs, they help you feel less hungry and more satisfied, okay, leading to that less overall calorie intake. We mentioned semaglutides, but again, this isn't the only player that exists in this game. Other GLP-1 receptor agonists include liraglutide or Saxenda, and the newer tirzepatide like Mounjaro and Zepbound as well. And they are also showing promise for weight loss. Here's some exciting data that we have on our screen from this clinical study. It shows that compared to placebo, these products, this class of drugs of GLP-1 agonists, can help people with diabetes lose an average of 4 to 6.2% of their body weight. Okay? And that's those patients, that patient population with diabetes. While those without diabetes, they can see even greater results. right? With an average weight loss of 6.1 to 17%. And these numbers are encouraging, right? But remember, individual results may vary. Everyone is different. The effectiveness of these products on weight loss can depend on various factors, right? Such as the specific product that you're using. We see that there are a lot of examples, a lot of types of GLP-1 agonists, different products. And these products are approved to be used in adjunct with exercise and diet, not a standalone.
Kiana, the I'm sure a lot of people have questions on that very bottom graph, the table that you have with diabetes with an average of 4 to 6, and then without diabetes, you have an average of 6 to 17%. Can you elaborate a little bit why people without diabetes have a higher average weight loss?
Of course. Now, from this clinical trial here, this review, this narrative review from which this was pulled, states that people with diabetes, they may have had obesity for a longer period of time than those without diabetes, right? So when they are introduced to these products, now it takes a longer period of time, or they may experience a smaller bit of weight loss. Right? These patient populations that have diabetes as well, they may be less adherent to exercise, right? Which all seems to potentiate the effects of these receptor agonists, GLP-1s. That's a great question. Now, we've talked about GLP-1 receptor agonists in general, but let's look at some specific names that you might encounter in the context of weight loss. Okay. So what I'm showing here are some popular options in the United States. It's crucial to understand that not all GLP-1 agonists are approved for weight loss by the FDA. Some, like Ozempic and Mounjaro, they are currently only approved for type 2 diabetes. While they may lead to weight loss as a side effect, it is not their approved intended purpose. Okay. So that's why we have them blocked out here in the red. Why is this important? Why am I discussing this here in this conversation of weight loss craze and navigating approvals for those products? It's because the FDA approval process ensures that medications are thoroughly tested and proven safe and effective for, again, their specific use. When a drug is used for an off-label purpose, like weight loss, although it's approved for diabetes, there could be unanticipated risks or side effects as it hasn't really been specifically evaluated for that specific use. Okay. Now, let's talk about the GLP-1 receptor agonists that are approved by the FDA for weight loss. Right? These are Wegovy, Saxenda, and Zepbound. These are those brand names for those. These medications have undergone rigorous testing specifically for this purpose of weight loss, right? Providing greater assurance of their safety and efficacy for weight management. Okay. So we have them listed here. We have the GLP-1 class that they're listed as here under the generic column, as well as their manufacturers here to the right. So now that we've covered GLP-1 agonists, their background, the rise and the popularity of these products, I would like to pose the question to Marianne here, right? What challenges in the healthcare system are we seeing and we facing with this class of drugs as a result of the rise of use for weight loss?
So we actually have several factors that are creating some issues right now. The first one is the increased demand. So Kiana had a slide up that talked about, I think from 2020 onward, you had this trend of decreasing amount of patients that were diabetic that were using this class of drugs with an increase in the weight loss area. And that's really attributed to a lot of the online social media, the social media influencers. I'm sure if you guys are on TikTok or Facebook or any other site, there's literally ads that pop up all the time about this. So that's one of the main issues at this point. because of the higher demand, now we do have a product shortage. In the beginning, actually, a lot of diabetics actually weren't even able to get their medications. And so a lot of the payers were putting a stop on the lower dose of the prescriptions and only allowing a higher dose for people that were diabetic. And that way they ensured that patients that were wanting to try it for weight loss weren't getting it. The third issue right now is with compounding. A lot of compounding pharmacies are out there stating that you can get this medication for a pretty relatively good price. And there are several issues that I will talk about later on regarding that. And then the last one, which is one of the biggest ones, is barriers to access. And what I mean by that is the prior authorizations. So that's really something that needs to be addressed.
Yes, I agree. And we definitely will touch on that prior authorization as a barrier to access. But you mentioned a very important topic on compounding, right? Compounding pharmacies that claim that they can make these medications in their own pharmacy if there is a product shortage for these GLP-1s. A question I have is which factors, I'm sorry, must be taken into consideration if a patient or provider is exploring compounding options for these products?
So there's a little bit of a background there that I do want to explain. Every year, the FDA comes out with something called a short list. So what that list is basically a list of medications for that year that are in shortage. And what that allows is for compounding pharmacies to make a version of that medication. What's important to remember is that the FDA doesn't actually test compounded medications for efficacy or safety. So that's just a key point that'll lead me to other factors here. Right now, if you go online and you look up semaglutide, you will find thousands of sites that actually have it. And semaglutide is the actual active form of the drug, and it's the only FDA approved form of the drug. Right now, you're going to see two salt forms that are out there, semaglutide acetate and semaglutide sodium. The FDA is has actually come out with several notices saying that those two are not FDA regulated, and they are cautioning people on purchasing those two forms of the medication. Another big issue is the counterfeit meds. People are buying these online, and they don't know if they're actually getting the medication or not. And then lastly is the sterile versus non-sterile conditions. So depending on where you go for a compounding pharmacy, if it's somewhere that's not new or accredited, they don't have the experience, there's a possibility of getting a medication with impurities in it.
You mentioned the search for these products online, and for example, the semaglutide and the different salt forms, and a patient may run into counterfeit pharmacies or counterfeit medications. Just for those who are in attendance or rewatching the webinar today, if you are in a search for a compounding pharmacy, how can one find a legitimate compounding pharmacy, one they can trust?
So we have a couple sites. Well, first, we need to see with compounding pharmacies, they are actually regulated at the state level, and there are regulations from the federal level. And they're also licensed at the state level. So there are ways to actually search. Kiana, go back to that other screen, the one for searching for the pharmacies. So this site actually allows you to go in and go by a geographical location to see if there's a compounding pharmacy that's accredited near where your patients are or near where you are. So it will help a lot. I do want to stress the issue of accreditation. That actually really ensures like the highest standards of quality and purity of medications and the pharmacists who make them. So that's important to look at. Do your homework before you go online to get a compounded medication. Lastly, I do want to say, before you try to get a compounded medication, it is highly advised to try to get the commercial medication if you're able to get it.
So these are great tips and hopefully insights. If anyone is looking or taking notes, we will also be sharing these slides and these insights for the recording as well.
Kiana, I apologize. I wanted to add, there is one other website that actually checks the online legitimacy of a pharmacy. And I don't know if you can pull that up real quick, or we'll provide it at the end, but it's a link and you can actually type in the web address of the online pharmacy and it will let you know if it's an actual legitimate pharmacy.
Awesome. Yes, I can definitely share that in. I can't. So I'm navigating multiple screens here. I'll definitely insert that here at the end.
Okay.
Now, the next question here that poses, hopefully is shared here. Which barriers currently exist for patients' access to these medications, right? You mentioned barriers to access in a previous slide, but which is the major obstacle that we are facing for these weight loss meds?
So prior authorizations, of course. So if you're a pharmacist or if you're a provider, prescriber, we all kind of dread this term. So prior authorizations, especially in this area, can be very difficult to navigate through.
Yes. Now, before we dive into specifically prior authorizations of GLP-1 products, let's first talk about the crucial aspect that's often encountered, like Marianne mentioned, seeking coverage, prior authorizations. This term might sound very complex, but we will break it down into simple terms very briefly first, okay? As way of background, prior authorization is essentially a review process. It's used by many insurance companies before approving coverage for certain medications, including GLP-1 agonists for weight loss. It's like a gatekeeper, right? Ensuring the medication is truly necessary and appropriate for an individual case. And there are three main reasons why insurance companies or payers use prior authorizations. The first being cost control, right? Drugs can be very expensive, and prior authorizations, they help to ensure that they're prescribed when truly needed and cost-effective alternatives aren't available first. For appropriateness, this allows the insurance company to assess if the medication is suitable for your specific health condition, right? In this case, it's suitable for your weight loss goals. And for alternatives, like we mentioned in this case, they may need to confirm you've tried other weight loss approaches or you have weight loss approaches in adjunct, right, before resorting to more expensive or popular medications like GLP-1s. And this process can vary, right, depending on your insurance plan and also the specific medication that you're dealing with. So we've talked about prior authorizations, but how do payers decide which medications are even covered in the first place? That's where formulary development comes in. This is the process that's used by insurance companies to create a list of approved medications that they will cover or pay for, including GLP-1s, right, for in this case. In developing a formulary, it isn't a simple task. Payers, they have to consider various factors, including clinical guidelines. They have to review research and new clinical studies that have come out. They also have to review HEOR studies, right, that analyze the cost effectiveness of medications. They'll also take a look at some treatment algorithms for a specific therapeutic area or disease state. We've talked about how prior authorizations and formularies are developed, how they work, but it isn't always smooth sailing. Unfortunately, it's not without its challenges, especially for patients that are seeking access to GLP-1s for weight loss. Sometimes patients, they may face delays or even denials in obtaining the medications that they need due to stringent and complex prior authorization requirements. The process can be time consuming and cumbersome because it requires doctors and patients to gather extensive documentation and navigate these complex rules, potentially taking away from other important tasks, right? And this back and forth communication with insurance companies, they can be lengthy, they can be frustrating, and they can, again, cause delays in starting a treatment and adding stress for both providers and also the patient. So now that we understand, again, the rise of these products for weight loss, we understand that prior authorizations are a barrier to accessing these medications by patients. We would love to hear from Mary Ann, again, in this area. What prior authorization criteria is required or can be used for patients to access these medications?
So first, we have to actually look at the FDA-approved indications. One of the first slides that Kiana had put up had referenced, had red for not approved and green for the approved medications. It's important to know that not all of your medications can be used for weight loss. So Ozempic and Mounjaro, although that name is very popular, those drugs are very popular, they will not be approved for weight loss indication, regardless. Wegovy, Saxenda, and Zepbound all have those FDA-approved indications. So, starting out with that prior authorization, you have to make sure that your ICD-10 code is correct. Plans like Medicare, for instance, if you happen to put an ICD-10 code that is not appropriate, they can actually block that medication from being approved moving forward. So it is very important. That step is very important, along with several other things, which I'll show.
Now, we have some example forms here of what a prior authorization for a particular product, such as Wegovy here, what that looks like. So I can share my screen.
Okay.
We have one for TRICARE as well for Prime Therapeutics.
Okay, so just so you guys know, just as a quick background, the FDA approval process for Wegovy, Saxenda, the BMI of a patient has to be 30 and above, or 27 with comorbid factors. And it's also approved for children that are 12 and up with a BMI in the 95th percentile. So those are important key factors there to consider. Now, we're looking at, this is called a drug-specific prior authorization form, meaning this is very specific just for Wegovy. And as you see here, this is something that the doctor has to fill out, and it actually gets sent electronically through Cover My Meds. There's another site called SureScripts that actually transmits it over to the PBM. You're going to see questions here, yes, no questions. And as you see, it's pretty extensive. So we'll go through these because I just want to demonstrate that every PBM has different criteria for getting medications approved. And some of them are a lot more complex. And depending on these questions, the person at the other side at the PBM is going to make a decision based on this yes, no. We call them decision trees. So we can go through a few of these just so you guys get an understanding. The third question there, they're asking if the medication is going to be given in combination with another medication. If you answer yes to that, they're going to go ahead and deny that right away. So it's important that this medication is actually taken alone. They also look at the claims history so to see if the patient's been on it before or if they've been on other medications, they call it like step therapy, in order to get approved for this medication. Pancreatitis, if you look at number 8, does the patient have a history of pancreatitis? This drug class actually increases your risk of pancreatitis as well as other some pretty serious side effects. So they like to ask these questions for safety as well. If you go down to number 10, Kiana, I thought this was an extremely interesting question. Is a patient of South Asian, Southeast Asian, or East Asian descent? And when I first started looking at this, I could not figure out why they would ask that question on a prior authorization. And then I found out for this particular group of people, the BMIs are actually different. So BMI for Southeast Asian or South Asian, they actually consider obese, overweight at 25. So they recommended a BMI of 23 for this group of people versus people that are not Asian, a 25 would be considered overweight. So again, there's some great complexities here and a lot of background that you have to be aware of to get these medications approved for your patients. I want to demonstrate, Kiana, if you can go to the other prior authorization. Okay, so this is TRICARE. This is a different insurance company. TRICARE actually approves this drug class, but it does vary. So just so you keep this in mind. And you see this form is a lot different than what we just saw. The age on there, again, so 12 and up, right? And it's going to tell you to keep going down. So this is another type of decision tree that helps to decide if these medications are going to be approved or not. Again, like question 7, when you look at that, that tells you right away, well, this is kind of a step therapy. You're going to have to try other medications first before you get approved for this medication. Question 8, patient diabetic. That's going to help actually get that medication approved. So again, there's a lack of transparency here. There's a lot of confusion, and this is an extremely time-consuming process. I actually wanted to be able to experience what it's like to actually submit a prior authorization. I've seen it behind closed curtains, but I actually wanted to be on the provider side. And I got to experience what people have had to go through. Even getting through to the PBM, I've had wait times up to an hour and a half trying to get a hold of somebody to ask questions to get these prior authorizations completed. So it's a frustrating process and it's extremely time consuming.
Now, when we discuss prior authorizations, right, we're going over the forms, the different forms, the complexities of these, and we've also, gone through the option of going the compounding pharmacy route, right? Another question that comes up is, are there any other ways to get these medications?
Yes. So depending on the drug that you're getting, they have some great patient assistance programs. That's one route. Another route is the direct-to-consumer healthcare program. Eli Lilly actually has made this pretty popular. It's actually been a program that's been around for a while, but because of their shortage with their Mounjaro as well as Zepbound, they've decided to come up with this model, which is brilliant, to be honest. You can actually access from their site a link that goes to a telehealth provider. And answering some questions, they will set you up with a telehealth provider who may be, depending on if you actually qualify for these medications. From there, that prescription actually gets sent to you directly from from Eli Lilly to the consumer. So that really helps out a lot. I don't know if any of you have actually had experiences of trying to get these medications. A lot of times you'll actually have to call several pharmacies to see if you can even get it if you're trying to go the commercial route. So this is an option for this drug and in other drug classes as well.
I agree. I think this is something that's going to transform healthcare as a whole. This is a model I think that we've seen before, very briefly, but this cuts out that middleman, right? Like you mentioned, we have the pharmacist, maybe mail orders. You have to deal with the pharmacy benefits manager. So this is direct to the patient, from manufacturer to patient. I think that's a great idea. All right. Now, that concludes our exploration of the weight loss craze and the rise of diabetic medications like semaglutides. I hope this information has been helpful, sparked some interesting questions. But before we wrap up, I see we have some fantastic questions in the chat so far. Now, as we move into our second half of the webinar, I'm excited to hear what's on your mind, right? So feel free to type your questions in the chat, and Marianne and I will answer them the best that we can. If we can't get to them here on the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us on our website. It's here at the bottom of the screen, priorauthtraining.org. Right. So this is your chance to get clarity and insights specific to your situation or to these claims. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at these questions we've got. Does approval differ for a type 1 versus type 2 diabetic?
Are we talking in reference to weight loss, or typically type 1 diabetics don't get this drug class of medications? So it would be a type 2, and absolutely the criteria for getting this is going to be very different. It's usually, don't quote me on this, but typically it's a little bit easier to get these medications approved as a type 2 diabetic versus weight loss. The BMIs looks like, so for a patient that does not have a comorbid condition, so if it would be 30 on the BMI for an adult. And then if there's a comorbid, for instance, coronary vascular disease, hypertension, anything that's metabolic related, usually it's a 27 BMI to get that approved.
Can government insurances like Medicare plans or Medicaid get coverage or patient assistance?
Excellent question. So Medicare currently does not actually cover weight loss drugs, unfortunately. Depending on the Advantage plan, there could be some possible assistance for that. Medicaid, believe it or not, depends on each state. So that's depending on where you live, you really have to do a little bit more digging into that. And then there are some great patient assistance programs depending on the manufacturer. And that the best way to do that is to actually go onto their site and take a look at what they're offering for patients. A lot of times there's a discount card. It's usually limited though in terms of the time. Sometimes it's for 1 year, sometimes it's 6 months. Again, it varies a lot. One other thing that I did want to cover is when we talk about formularies, and this throws another curveball in. Formularies change all the time. When it comes to Medicare, it's only twice a year that they can remove a drug from a formulary. But with these private payer plans, drugs come on and off the formulary all the time. And so that's just another source of frustration, but something to keep in mind, when looking at medications for your patients.
Good question.
Okay, I like that. So the last question there, is there a way to find these policy forms quickly to save time, and how would you find them? As a matter of fact, the ACMA actually has been working on really coming up with some custom solutions for this. And our IT team and we've come up with a new product. Kiana, can you pull that up for us if you can?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Kiana.
So this is the AI tool that Marianne mentioned, right? This is our field reimbursement prior auth AI. It's utilized by both providers and also field reimbursement teams and pharma companies as well. So to address your question, yes, right, it can be hard to find these forms, but with a tool, an AI tool that can find them for you, you can quickly save time, your search time, so that you can minimize the time consumption that it takes to complete that prior authorization and use the time that you saved from this AI tool into completing and submitting those forms.
Kiana, I wanted to give some feedback too. The AI tools are definitely a new concept for people, and really visualizing it, you have to kind of see it in action to see how this works. This is not a chat GPT, and it's important to know, with a chat GPT, there's really not a source of accuracy. So being able to decipher that is important too. Would you mind demonstrating how this works in terms
course.
of, okay.
So Marianne and I today, we actually use this tool to identify ICD codes, right? This is an important step when you're completing a prior authorization form, and that's something that you can utilize this tool for, right? So in this case, we can ask, what is the ICD code or ICD-10 code for obesity with comorbid conditions? So we can ask a question here directly into the tool and we're provided an answer, right? Instead of digging through your CPT code book, right, you can find it easily at your fingertips with a tool such as this. Okay. We also have a different capability here in this AI tool where you can actually make it your own if you're dealing with one particular class of drugs often or a particular therapeutic area. You can upload your forms and your informations that you use on a consistent basis and train and make this AI tool your own, right? You can customize it to your own internal documents so you can quickly have the information within those documents at your fingertips as well. You can ask similar questions here with those forms.
Kiana, are you able to pull up the drug specific forms that the one that we just saw with TRICARE? There are, I'll tell you guys this. So with these drug specific forms, it means exactly that. Depending on the medication, you can actually find the medications that are specific on the prior authorization. Some prior authorization forms are generic, and so you would have to actually fill it out yourself, and there's a lot of guessing games. The more specific forms actually help to guide you in answering the questions to be able to increase your approval rate. So here we find that the TRICARE, Saxenda, and Wegovy, right?
Very quickly.
To be able to manually search for these is incredibly time consuming.
I see a question here on the, I think it's on a graph that we showed previously. If 40% of prescriptions in 2023 were not for diabetics, prior auths were not in place. Okay, let's go back to this slide. No. It's not that prior authorizations were not in place. Let's go back. Now, the graph that we showed here that demonstrated your question, it doesn't show prior authorizations, any data surrounding the share of them that had to complete a prior authorization versus not, right? It's just that 40% of those who were prescribed a semaglutide here did not have type 2 diabetes. So in fact, they may have had to complete a prior authorization form for that product because they did not have type 2 diabetes. Not to say that they all had to complete a prior authorization or that they all did not.
Well, what's important to know too is, right now with specialty meds coming out and they're increasing every single year, I believe it's 99% of specialty medications actually require prior authorization. So this issue isn't really going anywhere. And it's something that we all need to collaborate on and figure out how to tackle these. So I wish these didn't have a prior auth on them, whether it's for diabetics or for weight loss. The FDA has actually approved this class for some cardiovascular diseases as well. And so we're going to actually see a continued and increased amount of prescriptions on this medications.
Okay. Here's a question. Does the reimbursement AI program you just demonstrated need to be purchased by our employer, or is that a free program so long as we create an account? No, this is usually purchased by your employer. It's license-based on an enterprise level. If you are looking for or need more support regarding the reimbursement AI program or anything surrounding prior authorizations or reimbursement for specialties, you can learn about how we collaborate with you, whether you are a provider or you work in pharma or biotech, with our website. Let me pull that back up for you. It's priorauthtraining.org. Here it is. And you can find all of our services, including reimbursement AI there. If you have any questions, we can connect you with one of our relationship managers. All right, I see another question here. You mentioned in one of the forms, if patients were taking other drugs, they may get rejected. Have you found patients get denied for those who are taking simvastatin?
Typically, you wouldn't see something isolated like this rejecting a prior authorization for this particular drug class. In fact, actually, simvastatin shows that there's a comorbid condition there. Of course, you'd have to actually document what that comorbid condition is. But with simvastatin, you're going to assume that the person has hypercholesterolemia or coronary vascular disease. And so that actually would help with getting that medication approved.
Other question? All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. I don't see any other questions that are coming in through to the chat. I genuinely appreciate you all being here, participating actively, asking questions. It shows also your passion, right? It's surrounding patient access and prior authorizations for these approvals and for these medications. Until next time, our next webinar next week, please stay healthy. Let us know if you have any questions. Again, our website is listed here. Marianne and I are both on LinkedIn, so please connect with us both if you have any questions so we can connect you to our team.
Thanks for joining.